The hum of the Los Angeles traffic was a constant, a vibration that had become the soundtrack to Alexandra Vance's life. It was the sound of money, of motion, of importance. Inside her corner office on the 42nd floor, the world was a grid of steel and glass, and she was its master cartographer. Spreadsheets glowed on her dual monitors, their neat columns and formulas a testament to a world she could control. A world of billable hours, leveraged buyouts, and multi-million-dollar settlements. Her assistant, a perpetually anxious young man named Miles, hovered at the door. The partners are waiting in conference room A, Alex. The Henderson merger. Alex didn't look up from her screen, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Tell them I'll be there in 90 seconds. I'm just recalibrating the post-acquisition synergy projections. Their initial numbers were optimistic. Of course, Miles murmured, disappearing. This was her element. The last-minute recalibration, the display of effortless intellectual dominance. At 34, Alex Vance was a razor-sharp blade in the finely oiled machine of corporate law. She lived for the win, for the satisfying click of a deal closing, for the respect, tinged with fear, in her colleagues' eyes. Her personal life was a neatly organized and largely neglected appendix to her career. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number with a 636 area code. She sent it to voicemail. It buzzed again. Irritated, she snatched it up. Vance? Ms. Vance? This is Eleanor Shipton from Shipton and Associates in Cedar Ridge, Missouri. The voice on the other end was genteel, laced with a slow, Midwestern cadence that felt alien in Alex's fast-paced world. I'm in the middle of something critical. If this is a sales call, it's about your great-aunt Beatrice Miller. Alex stilled. Aunt B, a name from a dusty, half-forgotten childhood memory. A woman who smelled of hay and cinnamon, who sent lumpy, hand-knitted sweaters for Christmas that Alex's mother would discreetly donate. B lived on a farm somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Alex hadn't thought of her in over a decade. What about her? Alex's tone was clipped. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Beatrice passed away peacefully 3 days ago. A flicker of something, regret perhaps, passed through Alex, but it was quickly buried under the more pressing matter of the Henderson merger. I'm sorry to hear that. Please send the funeral details to my assistant. I'll see if my schedule permits. That's not all, Ms. Vance. The lawyer interjected gently. You are named as the sole beneficiary in Beatrice's will. Alex blinked. What? Why me? You were her only living relative. She was very proud of you. She left you everything. Primarily, her property. The Meadow Creek goat farm. A goat farm. Alex almost laughed. The absurdity of it was staggering. A farm? In Missouri? I have no use for a farm. Sell it. Liquidate everything and deposit the proceeds into my account. She could already mentally allocate the funds. A down payment on a new penthouse, perhaps. It's not that simple, Miss Shipton said. The will has a residency clause. To inherit the estate free and clear, including a rather substantial, though currently dormant, trust fund your aunt established, you are required to reside on the farm for a continuous period of 90 days. If you fail to do so, the property and assets will be transferred to the current leaseholder, a Mr. Jacob Walker, who has been managing the farm's operations. Alex's blood ran cold. A clause? A 90-day sentence in some pastoral purgatory? This was insanity. That's preposterous. You can't be serious. The will is quite explicit, Ms. Vance. I've emailed you a copy. You have 30 days to decide. If you choose not to fulfill the stipulation, you simply sign a waiver and Mr. Walker becomes the owner. My condolences again on your loss. The line went dead. Alex stared at her phone, the hum of the city suddenly feeling oppressive. A goat farm. 90 days. It was like something out of a bad Hallmark movie. She pulled up the email, her eyes scanning the legalese. It was all there. The farm, the clause, the trust fund that was just large enough to be a significant nuisance to walk away from. For the first time in her professional life, Alex Vance walked into a high-stakes meeting completely distracted. The spreadsheets on the screen seemed trivial, their promises hollow. She had just been presented with a problem she couldn't solve with a deft legal argument or aggressive phone call. She had been presented with a choice, and both options felt like a loss. Cedar Ridge, Missouri, was not a town. It was a postcard that had faded in the sun. The main street consisted of a diner, a feed store, and a single, blinking traffic light. The air, as Alex stepped out of a rented sedan, was thick and heavy, smelling of damp earth, manure, and something sweetly floral she couldn't identify. It was a physical presence, this air, so different from the processed, chilled atmosphere of her LA high-rise. Meadow Creek Farm was at the end of a long, gravel lane, potholed and treacherous. The farmhouse was a two-story white clapboard structure with a wide porch, its paint peeling like a sunburn. To its left stood a large red barn, its doors sagging on their hinges, and behind it, rolling green pastures dotted with goats. Dozens of them. They were oddly charming and vaguely ridiculous creatures with their rectangular pupils and idle bleats. This was her inheritance, a monument to decay and rural stagnation. As she stood there, taking in the sheer scale of her predicament, a man emerged from the barn. He moved with a quiet, unhurried grace that was the antithesis of everything Alex embodied. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing worn jeans, a plaid shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, corded forearms, and heavy work boots. His face was all hard lines and angles, shadowed by a few days' growth of dark beard. His eyes, the color of weathered slate, assessed her with a cool, unnerving stillness. "You must be Vance," he said, his voice a low rumble. "No welcome, no smile." "Alexandra Vance," she corrected, straightening her spine and pulling her designer blazer tighter around her. "And you're Jacob Walker, I presume." He gave a curt nod. "Jake." He wiped his hands on a rag that was more stained than fabric. "Eleanor said you'd be coming." An awkward silence descended, broken only by the buzzing of insects and the distant sound of a goat's bleat. "Well," Alex said, her tone all business, "I'm sure we can make this efficient. I'll be staying for the required 90 days. I'll need a full inventory of the farm's assets, a profit and loss statement for the last 5 years, and your lease agreement. We can meet tomorrow morning at 8 to discuss a transition plan." Jake stared at her for a long moment, a flicker of something. Amusement? Contempt? In his eyes. "The goats don't care about your spreadsheets, city girl. They care about feed, water, and not getting sick. The P&L statement is that we're barely breaking even, and our meeting will have to be at 5:30 a.m. That's when morning milking starts. 5:30 in the morning. Alex felt a headache beginning to pulse behind her eyes. This was going to be a very long 90 days. The inside of the farmhouse was a time capsule. Doilies on armchairs, crocheted blankets, the faint, sweet scent of beeswax and old wood. It was clean, but cluttered with a lifetime of memories that belonged to a stranger. Alex felt like an intruder. Her first morning was a lesson in humiliation. The alarm on her phone screamed at 4:45 a.m. Dressing in the only practical clothes she'd brought, expensive yoga pants and a cashmere hoodie, she stumbled out to the barn in the pre-dawn chill. Jake was already there, moving with a quiet efficiency that Alex could only watch with a kind of bewildered awe. He was milking a line of Nubian goats, their long, floppy ears twitching as streams of milk hissed into the stainless steel pail. "You're late," he said without looking up. "It's not even light out," Alex grumbled. "The world doesn't run on your schedule out here." He gestured to a bucket and a three-legged stool. "Sit. Watch." For an hour, she did just that. She watched his large, capable hands, the gentle but firm way he handled the animals. She saw the quiet symbiosis between man and beast. It was a complex, physical ballet, and she was utterly useless. "Your turn," Jake said, nodding to a docile-looking brown goat. Alex sat on the stool, its uneven legs wobbling precariously. She tentatively reached for the goat's udder. "Not like that. You'll hurt her. Firm but gentle. Like this." He guided her hands, his own rough and calloused. The contact was electric and unsettling. Alex, who commanded courtrooms and boardrooms, flinched. She fumbled, squeezed too hard, and the goat skittered away, kicking over the bucket and spilling the precious milk into the straw. Jake let out a long, weary sigh. That's $5 worth of milk on the ground. And a frightened animal. He righted the bucket. Again, the days bled into a grueling routine. Mornings were for milking, feeding, and mucking out stalls, a task that made Alex gag for the first 3 days. Afternoons were for repairs, fixing fences that the goats seemed to delight in breaking, patching the barn roof, unclogging a temperamental water pump. Jake was a man of few words, his instructions terse and to the point. He didn't explain, he demonstrated. He didn't praise, he simply stopped criticizing when she finally got something right. Alex's body ached in ways she didn't know were possible. Her manicured hands were now chapped and dotted with blisters. Her LA life felt like a distant dream, the constant ping of emails and texts replaced by the lowing of cattle from a neighboring farm and the wind in the tall grass. She tried to impose order. She created a spreadsheet to track milk yields and feed costs. She researched goat breeds and market prices online, her laptop balanced on her knees on the porch as the sun set. She presented Jake with a business plan to optimize operations. He listened patiently, then said, "The lead doe nettle is off her feed. Your spreadsheet won't tell you that. But if you'd spent half as much time watching the herd as you did typing, you'd know." It was a brutal, constant reminder that her skills, the very things that defined her, were worthless here. The conflict came to a head over a goat named Pippin. Pippin was a young kid, skittish and small. Alex had, despite herself, developed a soft spot for him. One afternoon, she found him listless, lying in a corner of the pasture, his sides heaving. "Jake!" she yelled, running towards the barn, her heart hammering with a panic she hadn't felt since her first solo court case. "It's Pippin. Something's wrong." Jake emerged, his expression grim as he examined the little goat. "Bloat. He must have gotten into the grain bin. It's serious. What do we do? A vet? Call a vet." Alex demanded, pulling out her phone. "I'll find the best one in the state." "There's no time," Jake said, his voice calm but urgent. He was already striding towards the barn. "He'll be dead before a vet gets here. We have to do it." "Do what?" He came back with a length of hose and a bottle of mineral oil. "We have to relieve the pressure. I need you to hold him still." Horror washed over Alex. No, I can't. I don't know how." "You're going to learn," Jake said, his gaze locking with hers. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a stark, necessary truth. Right now, this isn't about your comfort. It's about his life. Hold him." Trembling, Alex knelt in the dirt and held the struggling kid. She whispered nonsense to him, tears streaming down her face as Jake worked with a focused, terrifying precision. It was messy, traumatic, and visceral. But after a few agonizing minutes, Pippin let out a weak bleat and struggled to his feet. He was going to be okay. Alex sat back in the dirt, covered in sweat and grime, and sobbed. It wasn't just about the goat. It was the release of 3 weeks of frustration, of helplessness, of the sheer, overwhelming weight of a world she didn't understand. Jake didn't offer a comforting word. He simply sat down beside her, his presence a solid, quiet anchor in her storm. After a long while, he said, "You did good, city girl." It was the first time he'd said anything that resembled a compliment. And in that moment, surrounded by the smell of hay and animal, Alex felt a sense of accomplishment deeper than any multi-million-dollar deal had ever given her. The incident with Pippin was a turning point. The wall of resistance between Alex and Jake began to crumble. She started asking questions instead of giving orders. He started offering explanations instead of just commands. One evening, over a simple dinner stew that Jake had made, he finally opened up. He told her about his own past, a former mechanic from St. Louis who had burned out on city life and found solace in the land. He'd come to work for Ampy 5 years ago, and she had become the family he never had. She was a tough old bird, Jake said, a rare smile touching his lips. Knew every one of these goats by name. Said they had more sense than most people. "She talked about you, you know." Alex looked up, surprised. "She did. All the time. The brilliant niece in L.A. She kept a scrapbook of every article she could find about your cases. She didn't understand your world, but she was so damned proud of you. Tears pricked Alex's eyes. She had dismissed Aunt B as a simple, rural relic. She had never taken the time to know the woman who had been her biggest fan from a distance. Inspired, Alex threw herself into the farm with a new purpose. It wasn't about serving a sentence anymore. It was about honoring Aunt BEA's legacy. She used her business acumen, not to impose, but to augment. She found a local cheesemaker interested in sourcing their goat milk for a specialty cheese. She set up a basic online store to sell artisanal soaps and yarn, using Jake's knowledge of the animals and her own knack for marketing. They fell into a rhythm, a partnership. She handled the books and the business development. He handled the land and the animals. They started spending their evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing as fireflies blinked in the gathering dusk. Alex found herself laughing more, the tight coil of stress in her chest slowly unwinding. She noticed the way the morning light caught the silver in Jake's hair, the quiet strength in his silence, the surprising gentleness in his hands when he handled a newborn kid. And he began to see past the sharp-suited lawyer to the determined, vulnerable woman beneath, a woman who was learning to bend so she wouldn't break. The 90-day deadline, once a prison sentence, now loomed like a cliff's edge. The thought of leaving Meadow Creek, of leaving Jake, sent a sharp, unexpected pain through her. The crisis arrived from the world Alex had left behind. A massive agricultural conglomerate, Heartland Provisions, began buying up all the surrounding land. Their representative, a slick man in a suit that reminded Alex of her former self, made an offer for Meadow Creek. It was a generous offer, more than enough to solve all the farm's financial woes and set Alex up comfortably back in L.A. It was the perfect exit strategy, a clean, profitable break. But when she presented the offer to Jake, his face closed down completely. "So that's it," he said, his voice flat. "The moment a real offer comes in, you're out. Back to your spreadsheets and skyscrapers." "Jake, be reasonable," Alex argued, her lawyer brain taking over. "This is a lifeline. We could pay off all the debts. You could start over somewhere else, maybe even buy your own place." "This is my place," he exploded, his quiet demeanor finally shattering. "This land, these animals, they're not just assets on a balance sheet. They're a life. It was Beatrice's life, and it's my life. I thought it was starting to become yours too, but I was wrong. You're just passing through." He turned and walked away, his broad back a wall of finality. His words cut deeper than any courtroom insult. He was right. She had been thinking like the old Alex, seeing only the numbers, the escape route. She hadn't seen the home, the community, the man she had come to love. That night, alone in the quiet farmhouse, Alex finally let herself admit it. She loved the smell of rain on dry earth. She loved the stupid, stubborn goats. She loved the quiet strength of Jake Walker. And the thought of selling it all, of watching this beautiful, fragile ecosystem be bulldozed for a corporate monoculture, made her feel physically ill. The old Alex would have taken the money and run. The new Alex, the one forged in Missouri dirt and nurtured by early mornings and quiet evenings, knew what she had to do. The next day, Alex requested a meeting with the Heartland Provisions representative. She didn't invite Jake. She met the man in the farmhouse, sitting at Aunt BEA's old kitchen table. "I've considered your offer," Alex said, her voice steady. "Excellent," the man smiled, sliding a contract across the table. "I think you'll find the terms more than fair." "They are," Alex agreed. "But my answer is no." The man's smile vanished. "I'm sorry, the farm is not for sale. Not now, not ever. We have other plans." He tried to argue, to pressure, to up the offer, but he was no match for Alexandra Vance, litigator. She dismantled his arguments with cool, precise logic, her old skills now serving a new, deeply personal purpose. She was defending her home. After he left, fuming, she found Jake in the barn, mending a harness. He didn't look up. "I told him no," she said softly. His hands stilled. He slowly raised his head, his eyes searching hers. "Why?" "Because you were right. This isn't just a piece of land. It's a home. It's my home, if you'll still have me." The silence between them stretched, filled with the soft sounds of the barn and the beating of her own heart. Then, Jake crossed the space between them in 2 long strides. He didn't say a word. He simply cupped her face in his rough, work-worn hands and kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of earth and hope, of a future she had never dared to imagine. 1 year later, the Los Angeles skyline was a glittering mirage on the horizon, seen from the window of a high-end restaurant. Across from Alex sat David Chun, one of the senior partners from her old firm. "The offer is still on the table, Alex," David said, sipping his wine. "The Henderson client specifically asked for you on the new merger. We're talking a 7-figure bonus. You can have your old office back. Hell, you can have a bigger one." A year ago, this would have been her ultimate dream. Now, it felt like a proposal for a life sentence. Alex smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached her eyes. She was wearing a simple linen dress, her skin tanned, her hands no longer perfectly manicured but strong and capable. "Thank you, David. That's a very generous offer, but I'm going to decline." He looked genuinely shocked. "Decline? Alex, what are you doing out there? I heard you inherited some farm." "I did," she said, her gaze drifting past him, as if she could see all the way to the rolling pastures of Missouri. "And it's the most challenging, rewarding, and beautiful thing I've ever done. We're launching our own line of goat milk caramel next month. The Meadow Creek Creamery is turning a profit for the first time in a decade." David stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. "I'm a partner there," Alex continued, her voice filled with a quiet pride. "A real one, not just on paper." Later that night, back at Meadow Creek, she stood on the porch, wrapped in Jake's arms. The air was cool, the sky a blanket of stars unseen in the light-polluted city. From the pasture, she could hear the soft bleat of a goat, probably Pippin, now a healthy, mischievous yearling. "How did the meeting go?" Jake asked, his chin resting on her head. "I turned them down," she said, leaning back into his solid warmth. "Any regrets?" Alex looked out at the land, her land, their land. She saw the sturdy barn, the contented animals, the lights of the house glowing warmly against the dark. She thought of the spreadsheets that now tracked the growth of their own business, a business built with sweat and hope, not fear and ambition. "Not a single one," she whispered. She had come to Meadow Creek to fulfill a clause in a will. She had stayed to fulfill a promise to herself. She had traded spreadsheets for soil, skyscrapers for starlight, and a high-powered career for a high, wide sky and a love that was as solid and real as the earth beneath her feet. She had finally found a life beyond the spreadsheet, and it was more than enough.